East. You have 15 minutes and 17 seconds left.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I was saying, on the 12th of September 2022, a shop owner along the Caroni South Bank Road, Kelly Village, was shot and killed. Over 30 spent rounds of 9mm ammunition was found at the scene. Madam Speaker, the perpetrators of this crime, upon getting away, crashed into an oncoming vehicle. The person that had the high-powered rifle pointed his weapon at the oncoming driver and asked the driver to stop and made a three-point turn and went along his merry way. We have actual dashcam footage of the gun shooter's face, Madam Speaker, and it was shared widely on WhatsApp groups. And to date, this person has not been found by the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, Madam Speaker. So this person is still at large. This person is still out there with his weapon and able to kill others, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, most disturbingly, on the 10th of October 2022, a young boy, 9 years old, was killed in Enterprise on African grounds. Madam Speaker, he was at the basketball courts in African grounds. A white panel van pulled up. Persons came out, fired upon another group of persons, and this young boy, 9 years old, was shot and killed. Madam Speaker, this one hit very, very close to home, as not only was this a very, very young man, I myself have done health clinics at African grounds, and I saw this young man at one of my health clinics, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this family has lost a son, and this is the point at which crime has reached in Caronese, where a young 9-year-old boy with the rest of his life to live is now gone forever from this earth, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on another part of my constituent, One Plaisy Road, Cunupia, on the 18th of October 2022, the body parts of 2 men were found in several garbage bags in a river in Mount Plaisy Road. Roughly 100 feet away, a leg was found floating, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this gruesome event took place in a quiet, peaceful village in Cunupia, Madam Speaker, and it is not the first time that a body has been found in this area on Mount Plaisy Road. How difficult is it to place a CCTV camera or at least some street lights that these persons know that this is not a place to dump murdered victims' bodies, Madam Speaker. And this continues to happen under the Minister of National Security's watch. Residents have made numerous pleas, Madam Speaker, for CCTV cameras as well as street lights in this area. This is a preventable crime, Madam Speaker, and more must be done, more will be done under Kamla Persad-Bissessar and a United National Congress government. Madam Speaker, I will now speak about my third question to the Minister of National Security, which was on the 4th of November 2022, and question number 17 on page 33 of the Hansard. And I asked Minister Hines, the Minister of National Security at the time, will the Minister inform this House what measures will be taken to cease the escalating crime and murders in Kelly Village, Caroni? Minister of National Security replied, he has received information from the Commissioner of Police, the Central Division Task Force, the Emergency Response Patrol Unit, and they have been recently retooled, retrained, and equipped for all types of eventualities. Madam Speaker, he went on to say, Kelly Village has come to be known as a hotspot zone by the TTPS. In addition, the Emergency Response Police Unit and other assets of the TTPS, driven by the intelligence element within the police service and outside of it, have been redeployed to augment the usual patrols in this community. In this regard, the TTPS has been focusing a large chunk of its resources in Kelly Village and environs to alleviate the incidence of violence crime. Again, Madam Speaker, promises, promises, promises. He said, and these were his words, that the Central Division Task Force and the Emergency Response Patrol Unit had been retooled, retrained, and equipped. Madam Speaker, on the 12th of December 2022, a 52-year-old businessman was fatally shot again on the Caroni South Bank Road, Piaco. And Madam Speaker, this victim was a well-respected businessman in the area from hydraulic trades. And the persons that robbed him and killed him got $500 worth of hardware supplies from this man, Madam Speaker. And this brings me to the point of the extortion of business persons in Kelly Village. Criminals are going business place to business place and demanding protection money, Madam Speaker. They are demanding protection money. Businesses are being taxed. They are being told, pay silver or take lead. And if you don't pay every month, Madam Speaker, your safety as a business owner is in jeopardy. Police officers have advised business owners not to pay and to report this to the police. But the fear that these business owners face and feel, Madam Speaker, in many cases, they still pay this extortion money, Madam Speaker. What is the point of not paying this extortion money, calling the TTPS at Caroni, at Cunupia, or at Las Lomas in an emergency, and being told there are no cars available? Who will protect you then, Madam Speaker, meaning the business persons? So this is happening right now as I speak, Madam Speaker, a total failure by this Minister of National Security. And I would like those on the other side to please rebut many of the things I'm saying here. Please give the country an explanation for what is happening in Kelly Village. Defend it. Go ahead and defend it. Madam Speaker, on the 2nd of January 2023, again in Kelly Village, a man and a young lady were sitting along Church Street in Kelly Village, and they were both killed. 30 bullets again, Madam Speaker. It's probably the same weapon and maybe the same shooter. And the villagers at the time told the newspaper that the Caroni police station does not have enough vehicles to cover the Kelly Village area, and that Kelly Village has become a key hiding spot for criminals from other communities. And most interestingly, Madam Speaker, the villagers also told that reporter that criminals are using the Caroni River to transport their drugs and their guns under the cover of night. So they are not going along the roadways. They are using the Caroni River to transport drugs and persons and ammunition under the cover of night, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on the 22nd of January 2023, again another person was killed on Palm Drive in Kelly Village. 30 spent shells again. 30 spent shells, another illegal high-powered weapon, and no CCTV cameras still, Madam Speaker. After 3 questions, 3 consecutive years in Parliament asking for this. And it's on Hansard, so he can't say, I didn't ask for it. Madam Speaker, on the 22nd of January 2023, 4 persons were shot. 2 were killed at a popular bar on the southern main road in Cunupia. And this happened at 11:25 p.m. And the sad thing about this, Madam Speaker, is that this was 100 meters from the Cunupia police station. Right? And there's a video of the person shooting these persons. 2 persons died. He just jumped in the car and he drives straight past the police station and up the road. Madam Speaker. Right? 100 meters, less than 100 meters. I'm using 100 meters just to be safe. Less than 100 meters from the Cunupia police station. 2 persons murdered, 2 persons shot. And nobody was caught. Totally forgotten. And that murderer still lives today, and that gun is still out there today. So this goes to show that the police stations themselves have no type of surveillance. Otherwise, they would have picked up that car on their tapes. But $80 million for a palace in Tobago, Madam Speaker. $80 million for a palace for one in Tobago. Madam Speaker, it gets worse. On the 9th of July 2023, Airport Boulevard Road, which is obliquely opposite Camachi's Bar, which I spoke about before, and this one is probably less than 50 meters, 4 people were shot. 4 people were shot. In this case, 1 person died. But the interesting thing about this one is that man, woman, child, and dog was shot, right? A 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, The adult male died, as well as 2 dogs. Man, woman, child, and dog, Madam Speaker. So it's not even children, not even the dogs are being spared by these gunmen, Madam Speaker. And I am running out of time here, Madam Speaker, and there's so much more here to speak about. The most disturbing one probably was on the 12th of May, 2023, just a month or 2 ago, in the busiest intersection in St. Helena, Madras Road and Carney South Bank Road. A man and his young child in the backseat, a 3-year-old, and they alighted from a vehicle behind and bullets up that car, to put it crudely. 30 spent shells. That person was killed at 12 noon, Madam Speaker, in the day, right in front of Mario's. Right? And he had his 3-year-old daughter in the back seat, Madam Speaker. And this was in front of residents. This was in front of commuters. This was in front of business owners. And no CCTV cameras again, Madam Speaker. A senior police officer at the time said it was only by the grace of God that the 3-year-old was unharmed. People also expressed shock in the area. One person said, I don't want the government to call a state of emergency, but what else can we do right now? It is children's lives that are in danger, Madam Speaker. And I skipped many crimes. I'll probably get to it in the budget, but I don't have the time to do them right now. And I would like to move to the 3 Central Division Town meetings that we had in Caronies. We had one at the St. David RC Primary School on the 19th of January, 2023. We had another at the St. Helena Hindu School on the 27th of April, 2023. And we had another at the Warrenville Regional Complex on the 25th of May, 2023. And Madam Speaker, it broke my heart to be at these meetings, reason being, I heard what the residents of each of these areas had to say. And the issues raised were juvenile delinquency, robberies, drug dealing, home invasions, gang proliferation, drive-by assassination, extortion of business owners, lack of high-powered guns for officers, the use of army ammunition at crime sites, the lack of body armor for responding officers, the use of the Caroni River to transport drugs and guns, limited police vehicles at the 3 police stations in the area, and the fact that they have been begging for a police post in Kelly Village just to stop this onslaught. Madam Speaker, with the few minutes I have remaining, I'd like to thank and commend Senior Superintendent Michael Pierre, Superintendent Miguel Montrichard, Acting Superintendent Ramdani Dipchan, Senior Superintendent Andrew Eli, Sergeant Richardson, Superintendent Subero, Retired Assistant Commissioner of Police Joan Archie, and Inspector Sylvan for the time and effort that they have made in reaching out to the constituents and the residents of Caronies, and I thank them for that. But what we learned in all of these meetings is that no matter what we may plead to them, they come back and they tell you they are not in charge of the resources. They are not in charge of the purse book of the nation. They cannot put resources as they wish. All they can do is respond, and they are available for contact in an emergency. But there's only so much they can do. The stations have no police officers. When I say no, I mean not enough. There is not enough weaponry for the police officers. They don't have police vehicles to even respond, Madam Speaker. And how is a police officer going to face these criminals with these high-powered rifles? How are they going to face those persons, Madam Speaker? So, Madam Speaker, part of my Kamla Prasad recessors and the UNC plans are for community comfort patrols. And this will secure many of the communities in our areas and throw off these criminals as they may not know when a vehicle might pass. We are also asking for legal gun ownership for persons that may qualify, persons that may have business interests and may be targets. They need to be able to protect themselves and not be victims all the time. We are asking for, and we will do, improve street lighting in poorly lit areas and try to help those persons that may have to travel home in the dark and walk up a lonely dark road. We are asking to secure our children with the use of municipal police in primary and secondary schools. And it's also a means by which we may. Madam Speaker, I would like to commend this motion, and I greatly approve this motion of no confidence in the Minister of National Security.
Member for Tobago East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to join in this debate. Madam Speaker, I know it has been done before, but please permit me just to read out the motion again. The motion says, whereas the Minister of National Security is responsible for ensuring public safety by the maintenance of law and order and the effective oversight of the national security infrastructure, and whereas the Minister of National Security, through his vast and continued incompetence, has mismanaged the organs and departments of national security, and whereas the Minister of National Security has unequivocally demonstrated his inability to competently execute his duties, be it resolved that this House express its lack of confidence in the Minister of National Security. Madam Speaker, this motion is dangerous, misleading, and counterproductive, and I reject it outright. Madam Speaker, the motion starts by asserting that the Minister is responsible for ensuring public safety by the maintenance of law and order and effective oversight of the national security apparatus. While the Minister of National Security has a role to play, Madam Speaker, he is not solely responsible. Madam Speaker, it was only this week where I fully understood the concept of having a system in place to integrate safety, security, and to reduce crime and violence. And at the heart of that, Madam Speaker, was an understanding that it calls for an all-of-society approach. Madam Speaker, the members who spoke opposite constantly call for a change in minister, but that is a strategy that they tried, and it did not work. So we must go back to the drawing board. Madam Speaker, law and order, peace and security are not handouts that we must sit back and wait on. Regardless of our station in life, regardless of where we may stand on the political divide, we, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, must all work together towards the attainance and maintenance of law and order, peace and security. And Madam Speaker, that is why I say the motion is dangerous, the motion is misleading, the motion is counterproductive, and I reject it outright. And Madam Speaker, I want to again indicate my full confidence in the Minister of National Security. I want to express my full confidence in the efforts of the Minister of National Security, his team, as well as my other colleagues, as we all work towards ensuring peace and security and safety in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, regardless of how much money we pump into policing, border control, regardless of how many ministers of national security may be appointed, unless there is an acceptance of the fact that we can only see a reduction of crime and violence and an increase of peace and security, if there's an all-of-society approach, and I'm going to keep reiterating that, Madam Speaker, because that is what is required. So we can sit across the aisle and point fingers. We may highlight a particular minister, but Madam Speaker, at the end of the day, unless Trinidad and Tobago embrace the strategy, unless we all buy into the efforts, and unless we all work collectively towards attaining peace and safety and security, then we will be doomed, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, There has been a number of strategies that would have been employed. I have seen where we would have increased the number of CCTV cameras. I've seen where we would have increased the number of officers who are being recruited and trained. I've seen where we have purchased offshore patrol vessels to provide surveillance of our coastlines. I've seen where we have pumped money into police youth clubs. I've seen where we would have tried to develop strategies to address crime and violence in school. I've seen where we have set up a National Standing Committee on Child Protection to reduce child abuse and to improve the way we care for children who fall into the hands of the state. But, Madam Speaker, I go back to my original point. Unless Trinidad and Tobago is working together, then we will not see any success. Madam Speaker, I said it was just this week where I really understood the concept that for there to be success in any effort, any measure to address crime and violence, we must have an all-of-society approach and full buy-in. And that calls for buy-in and support from those on the other side of the aisle, Madam Speaker. So coming here and calling out the statistics is all well and fine to remind us, it grounds us, it centers us. Coming here and calling out the names, that is important. It causes us to reflect and think about how we can do better. But we need your help. The Minister of National Security cannot and should not be expected to do it alone. Madam Speaker, as we walk through airports, in international airports, even our own, you will see the signs up. See something, say something. And that is important because it is a call to action. In any airport at any time, something can happen. But for that not to happen, it is dependent on somebody seeing something and saying something for action to occur. And Madam Speaker, I want to share an example of something that happened recently, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I heard when the member of Shaquanas read out all the names and all the statistics. And while he was reading, I felt the pain and the hurt of persons who have lost loved ones. Because, Madam Speaker, this week I am still amongst many trying to locate a friend who went missing with his vehicle. But in my post and my call to Trinidad and Tobago in trying to locate my friend, I said, somebody saw something. Somebody might have heard something. Somebody might have seen something. Please come forward. Madam Speaker, the Minister of National Security can't be in everybody's home. He can't be at the side of every street. Police officers can't be in every PH car. The soldiers can't be on every street corner every day. But people know what is happening. Madam Speaker, the gangsters, when they're talking and they lie down with their girlfriend, sometimes they tell them where they're going to put down the next walk. It's for the girlfriend to come forward and talk. Madam Speaker, sometimes when a man is abusing his son or his daughter, sometimes he'll go on the block and big up his chest and tell his friends that they are eating before 12. It's for the friend to come forward and talk, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, sometimes when young girls enter into PH cars, somebody would have seen them going in and would have known that that person is a predator. It's for that person to come forward and talk, Madam Speaker. The Minister of National Security is not God. He can't see everything. He can't do everything. He can't be everything. But collectively, Trinidad and Tobago, we can solve this problem. And Madam Speaker, I want to use this opportunity to ask the public, to ask the citizenry to join us in our efforts to establish a safe, secure, and peaceful society. Madam Speaker, one of the earlier presenters on the opposition side spoke about gender-based violence and violence against women, and they would have indicated that there's a report coming out from the UK, some reporter put out a story about, violence against women in Trinidad and Tobago. And Madam Speaker, while the person was saying that, I said, the hypocrisy. Other countries with more resources, better technology, more people to see and report, they have the same situation, but they constantly pick on Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago, who, even though things aren't perfect, the Trinidad and Tobago that is leading in many aspects, Madam Speaker, in bringing about a change in terms of how we respond to crime and violence in not only our society, but the Caribbean, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, I want to speak to what we have been doing as it pertains specifically to women and girls. Just recently, Madam Speaker, Cabinet has started reconsidering, the government has started reconsidering the revised and updated National Action Plan on Gender-Based Violence 2023 to 2027. The revised action plan, which was developed through participatory, inclusive, and collaborative means through the support of the Spotlight Initiative, plans to foster a zero tolerance for gender-based violence and sexual violence and provide a coordinated strategy to end GBV and sexual violence in Trinidad and Tobago across 5 outcomes. And permit me, Madam Speaker, to outline the 5 outcomes that we are looking at. Outcome number 1. Citizens of Trinidad and Tobago will demonstrate increased awareness and intolerance towards all forms of gender-based violence and sexual violence. Madam Speaker, this is important because for too long in our society, we have developed a high tolerance towards gender-based violence and sexual violence, where to an extent it has become normalized. So even in our art form, you see people glorifying violence and the objectification of women. You hear people talking about kicking in she back door, and you hear people singing about gunman in she hole. Now, if you want to bring about change, we have to even start with the art form and start with the messaging, because these things go into the minds of our young people and they start accepting it as though it is normal, as though it is acceptable. We have to start changing the discourse. This is beyond the Minister of National Security. This is for all of us to carry the same message. Madam Speaker, outcome number 2. Effective, inclusive, and gender-responsive services delivered to victims and survivors. On many occasions, Madam Speaker, persons who are victims and survivors of gender-based violence, they need the... Madam Speaker, I'm being disturbed.
Members, let's all listen to the contribution. Thank you.
Madam Speaker, as I was saying, outcome number 2, we are working towards effective, inclusive, and gender-responsive services delivered to victims and survivors of gender-based violence and sexual violence. Outcome number 3, robust legislation implemented by knowledgeable and effective duty bearers, delivering the consistent administration of justice that is underpinned by gender-based violence and sexual violence victim and survivor-centered principles and accessible to all. And Madam Speaker, you see this concept of duty bearers, that is very, very important, because we are all duty bearers. We all have a responsibility to stand guard as we try to protect Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to bring a point. Madam Speaker, almost every sitting where I have a question to answer, I am knocked about what we're doing about protecting children. And I've said on more than one occasion, we need to educate each other as well as the public so that we become the vanguards. Provide a training workshop, Madam Speaker. Tell me how many of my opposition colleagues turn up, Madam Speaker, on child abuse prevention. But we're not giving up. We decided that, yes, we're going to try again. And I'm making this an opportunity to call on my opposition colleagues to make yourselves available and make your offices available so that they will gain the knowledge to help us to prevent child abuse. This is important because, as my colleague Minister of Education said, children who are hurt, children who are neglected, sometimes become the center of attention for the minister and the Ministry of National Security later on if they don't get the right intervention at the right time. So, Madam Speaker, I go back to my original point. The motion is dangerous and misleading. If the motion had said we call on all of Trinidad and Tobago, then I would have accepted it, Madam Speaker, because we all have a role to play, a crucial role. Madam Speaker, outcome number 4, improved mechanisms for opportunities for redress and reparations for victims and survivors of gender-based violence and sexual violence, as well as appropriate penalties and rehabilitative resources for perpetrators. It doesn't make sense for us to only focus on those persons who fall victim, but we also have to do the research. We also have to understand the minds of the perpetrators and put systems in place so that we could prevent them from further perpetrating or even save someone from becoming a first-time perpetrator. Madam Speaker, that is not just the work of the Minister of National Security. That calls on all of government approach and all of society approach, and we are all responsible for that. So again, Madam Speaker, I want to thank my Minister of National Security for being an active participant and contributor on our National Standing Committee on Child Protection. He has been dedicated, he has been contributing, and Madam Speaker, I am all confident that once he continues on his good work and his good vein, that we will see a change. Once Trinidad and Tobago decides to come on board and play this game with us, work with us, help us to achieve the outcomes that we desire. Outcome number 5, Madam Speaker, strengthen and effective gender-responsive interventions through enhanced multi-stakeholder coordination and synergistic applications that address GBV and sexual violence in Trinidad and Tobago, including rehabilitation of perpetrators. Madam Speaker, the structure of the proposed National Strategic Action Plan to End Gender-Based Violence and Sexual Violence 2023 to 2027 aligns with established commitments and focuses on the areas of prevention, protection, prosecution, punishment or penalties, and the effective provision of redress for victims and survivors of GBV and sexual violence, including children, the elderly, and persons with disabilities. Key to the successful implementation of the NSAP is the collaboration between government, civil society, and international partners. And Madam Speaker, we see where through the Spotlight initiative to end gender-based violence and to end violence against women and girls specifically, where we have that collaboration and coordination amongst government, civil society, and international partners, we are seeing inroads. And I go back to my colleague from Mayaro, who spoke in the Spotlight Initiative event about how Spotlight is impacting his community and helping to address domestic violence, etc. So, Madam Speaker, we see where we have that all-of-society approach, where civil society and government and the media and the judiciary and everyone is working together, we can bring about peace and security and reduce crime and violence in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, in seeking innovative and novel ways to address gun and gang violence, this government has decided to embrace a new approach and to embrace a novel approach. And through engaging with international partners, we have decided that Trinidad and Tobago would start looking at WPS, that is Women, Peace and Security, as one of our strategies. In April 2023, Trinidad and Tobago joined the Women, Peace and Security Focal Point Networks. And Madam Speaker, I want to commend the Minister of National Security when I invited him to be a part of the delegation to Washington for us to meet with other members of the network and other countries looking at embracing the WS agenda. He willingly agreed. He came along and he told me the experience made it even easier for him to understand and implement strategies around gender within not only the Ministry of National Security, but the national security apparatus and framework. Madam Speaker, WPS is underpinned by the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. And while a number of countries in the network are not in a state of conflict, because WPS really speaks about women and girls in times of conflict. While many of the countries are not in a state of conflict, they have been adapting the agenda and the framework to suit their domestic context. So I remember, Madam Speaker, when the Canadian High Commissioner met with me and when I started having discussions with the UN, I said, well, we're not in any armed conflict in Trinidad and Tobago, we're not at war, but I said we have an internal situation that this strategy might help us to address. And I would have indicated, after discussions with my colleague, Minister of National Security, adapting and adopting this strategy to address gang violence and gun violence. Madam Speaker, I am happy to note that in April, we became a member of the network. But, Madam Speaker, beyond becoming a member of the network, we have started the work towards developing our own national action plan using the WPS strategy and agenda and framework to help to address gun and gang violence in Trinidad and Tobago. Among other issues, Madam Speaker, we held our first workshop this week. And Madam Speaker, one of the things I asked my permanent secretary when I was entering the venue, I said, I gave instructions for us to invite parliamentarians, including the opposition, because I believe that you all are a valuable and valued contributor towards the development of this particular action plan. You have constituencies, you have communities, you are leaders in your own right within your constituencies, so your voice mattered. And he said, yes, we invited them. But, Madam Speaker, I did not see any of my colleagues there. Member for Stour Barata, you really disappointed me. I was expecting to see you there. Member for Couva South, I was expecting to see you there. Member for Pointe-à-Pierre, you yourself I was expecting to see there. Because you see, Madam Speaker, for this thing to really work, Madam Speaker, for this thing to really work, for us to really develop the strategy and get the full buy-in that is required, we need to have that collaboration across the aisle. We need to demonstrate to Trinidad and Tobago that we're bigger than petty politics. And when it comes to issues such as crime and violence, that we could put aside our differences and work collectively. So, Madam Speaker, I'm taking the opportunity when we have further workshops that all my colleagues on the divide would come across and help us to develop this strategy, because it would not only be for this time and this government. You don't know what the future may hold. It would be for future generations to benefit from, because, Madam Speaker, at the end of the day, what we are working towards is a safe and secure Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, we could buy more police vehicles. Madam Speaker, we could get more offshore patrol vessels. Madam Speaker, we could get more police officers. But, Madam Speaker, if the persons who are responsible for executing the work and committed to the work and passionate, no matter how of a good leader, a good minister, my colleague and friend, Minister Hines may be, if the people on the ground aren't willing to do the work and put in the work, Madam Speaker, we're going to still have problems. So I want to use this opportunity to call on those officers within the police service who may be involved, Madam Speaker, in illegal activities to reconsider. We need you. Your country needs you to be the best version of you so that we can safeguard our sons and daughters who are dying. Madam Speaker, I want to call on those persons within the various arms of the Defense Force who may be thinking about getting involved in illegal activities to reconsider. We need you to safeguard us. We need you as part of the process. I want to call on families and parents, Madam Speaker. You can't leave the parenting up to your schools and to politicians. You have to put the interests of your children first. We need you. Madam Speaker, I want to call on the religious leaders. You have to use your voice and your influence for good. We need you to help us to solve this problem with crime and violence in Trinidad and Tobago. And, Madam Speaker, I want to call on the media. You have the power of influence. You have the ability to educate and disseminate information. Do it responsibly. Do it wisely. We need you on this fight, Madam Speaker. I started my contribution by saying what is required is an all-of-society approach. And Madam Speaker, we must get that in our heads in Trinidad, and we must accept that it's an all-of-society approach that is required. Madam Speaker, I started my contribution by saying that the motion is dangerous, misleading, and counterproductive. And I stand by that. Because the focus should not be on the Minister of National Security or bringing another Minister of National Security. The focus should be on calling on all of us as citizens, as right-thinking, decent citizens, as honorable members, to bring about the collaboration, partnership required for us to really seize and take control of the crime in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, I want to commend, I want to honor, I want to salute my colleague and friend, Minister Hines. And I want to thank him for being able to withstand the pressure and remain committed to service, to remain committed to trying to bring up the best possible framework and solution that we can all work together to bring an end to crime and violence. But Madam Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago, colleagues on the opposition side, we have to do better. We have to use our leadership positions to encourage persons to be the best versions of themselves so that Trinidad and Tobago could be a safe place. And Madam Speaker, just as the many persons who have put out posters for missing loved ones, as I again share the poster for my friend, if you see something, say something. If you heard something, report it. Persons are hurting, but your voice, the information that you might have when you're in the quiet of the night, your friend, your lover, your neighbor whispering to you, bring the information forward so that we can once again restore the peace and security of our nation. I thank you for this opportunity, Madam Speaker.
Member for Princess Down.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to the motion currently before the House. Madam Speaker, I listened attentively to the Minister of Gender, Youth and Child Affairs, the Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister. And Madam Speaker, I want to say off the bat that stranger things have happened. However, it is a parody of comedies when one minister who citizens have no confidence in comes to defend another minister on a no-confidence motion. The Minister of Gender and Child Affairs herself has faced many calls to either resign or be removed, that lending her support to the Minister of National Security today does more harm than good. Madam Speaker, the honourable member, in her wrapping up, and I thought that the honourable member would have taken the 45 minutes because she has a very important component that deals with the protection of our nation's children, working in tandem with the minister who is the subject of the no-confidence motion. But instead, Madam Speaker, in typical PNM style, instead of defending the Minister of National Security on matters of substance, instead the minister, who we just heard from, called on the army, called on the police, called on religious leaders, called on the media. But, Madam Speaker, I want to tell the honourable member that there's a publication by CNC3 Television, Trinidad and Tobago on January 7th, 2014. And while the honourable member called on the army and the police and the religious leader and the media and the society to assist with crime, it was the People's National Movement on January 7, 2014 that said this to the country. The People's National Movement says it has an overnight plan to fix the police service and crime on a whole. 8 years later, the minister with responsibility for gender and child affairs, in contributing to this no confidence motion in the Minister of National Security, wants us to forget that this was the assurance that was given to the electorate by the People's National Movement, by their members, that they had an overnight plan to fix the police service and crime on a whole. Madam Speaker, the honourable member told us, if you see something, say something. And throughout the member's presentation, it was something that the honourable member repeated. If you see something, say something. But I want to remind the honourable member that it is this very Minister of National Security who is on the public record as telling constituents that if you see the police passing and you have a gun in your possession, throw it out on the road and you don't know where that come from. But the member seems to think yesterday is yesterday and today is today, and wants to tell Trinidad and Tobago, if you see something, say something, but refuses to be held to a higher standard as an office holder by doing what is right and not just saying what is right, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the honourable member, in a very feeble, weak, lame attempt at defending the Minister of National Security, the member for Laventille West, told us about some of the programs the honourable member had embarked on and got her colleague, the Minister of National Security, to buy into and support. One was the Women, Peace and Security Program. And the honourable member told us about the work that she had been doing with the Minister of National Security through this Women, Peace and Security Program. I want to ask the honourable member, Madam Speaker, through you, where was this program when Ashanti Riley was murdered in Santa Cruz? Where was this program when Andrea Barrett was murdered in the heights of Aripo? For days, weeks, and months, this government appeared as though their day had PIP. Because these are just two instances, Madam Speaker, where the Minister of National Security, the person charged with the responsibility, at least when we look at the schedule, and we interpret the minister's role in the Constitution, that this minister had this overarching remit in terms of security, in terms of policy, and in terms of direction. But not a word came out from the honourable member for Tobago East when these things occurred, when we could not see the Minister of National Security, who was either running from water or running from his constituents. The honourable member also ran from all of Trinidad and Tobago, when Trinidad and Tobago were looking and searching for answers from the Honourable Minister of National Security as it relates to the protection of women and children in our country. And therefore I find it hypocritical for the member for Tobago East, the Minister of Gender and Child Affairs, to come to the population and pontificate once more. Madam Speaker, it is 8 years, 8 long years, where thousands of our citizens have been murdered, bludgeoned, raped, robbed, and brutalized. And the minister who spoke before me appears now to the national community as though she has a stump speech. That the minister will just throw out these words about protecting our nation's children and our nation's women, but will not give us any specifics in terms of the data, in terms of the programs and the policies that she is working on in tandem with her colleague who is the subject of today's motion, and tell us this is what you have achieved. Instead, Madam Speaker, I want to remind this honorable House that it was just a few weeks ago, the member for Laventille West, the Minister of National Security, came to the Parliament as part of the media review exercise that we went through. And additional monies were appropriated to the TTPS, to the Children's Authority, and to various agencies and ministries of the state. But I recalled when I looked at the line items under the ministry with responsibility for the Children's Authority, and I asked about the security arrangements through the Child Protection Unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, about this program that is now going to be implemented for all the children's homes to be monitored by the Children's Authority. And the government, every time we ask questions, hard, tough questions, as it relates to the failure of the government to protect our nation's women and children, there's a standard answer, just as the member for Tobago's East gives us his stump speech, full of hypocrisy and crocodile tears. The member told us, these are national security matters and we cannot put that in the public domain. But what is now in the public domain, Madam Speaker, is that almost every month, and we were told this by the Director of the Children's Authority, that there are over 400 cases of child abuse reported to the TTPS on a monthly basis in this country. But when we ask our colleagues, the Minister of National Security, the member for Tobago East, who spoke glowingly about the working relationship between the two for the protection of women and children, we are given a blanket answer, that is national security matters and we cannot go into it. Madam Speaker, that is unacceptable, but I understand why members opposite do it, because it is a bandage. It is a bandage to mask and hide the incompetence. Because while they tell us it's an all-of-government approach, it is also an all-of-government approach in terms of the incompetence that they all exhibit, Madam Speaker. And therefore, today, one would have thought that when the member for Tobago East, a critical area in the protection of women and children, had the opportunity to defend the member for Laventille West, the Minister of National Security, would have shared the critical component of the Child Protection Unit that falls under the purview. When we look at the schedule of the Minister of National Security, Madam Speaker, and you see that the Child Protection Unit falls as part of the TTPS under the Minister of National Security, but yet we are being told that there are 400 cases on an average of child abuse in this country. We are told that there is a SABGA report and there's a Justice Judith Jones report, but we cannot be told up to now, neither the member for Laventille West, the Minister of National Security, nor his colleague who sought in a very feeble and weak and lame attempt to defend his track record, could not tell us how many persons have been removed from these children's homes, how many of these persons have been charged, how many cases are before the courts. Those were the statistics we also wanted to hear. Under the direction of the member for Laventille West, the Minister of National Security, How has the Child Protection Unit been strengthened? We did not hear about that. Those were the things that the honorable member for Tobago East should have spent regaling us about in terms of the work being done by the member for Laventille West. But the member for Tobago East could not tell us that because it is not being done. Madam Speaker, I tell you, and I've been saying this since 2016, 2017, 2018. It is on the Hansard of this Parliament where I've been asking about the Child Protection Unit in this country. And the member for Laventille West, up to a few months ago when I asked that question, who the no confidence motion has been brought against by the member for Barataria San Juan. And the member for Barataria San Juan, I want to congratulate him, Madam Speaker, because his motion reflects the pulse of the people of Trinidad and Tobago who are living in despair. And today the opposition once more, we could have chosen any of the motions that we have on the order paper, Madam Speaker. There are several critical areas in the country that we have brought motions that are on the order paper. But in determining which one we did today, we saw, we heard the cries of the people of Trinidad and Tobago as the blood continues to flow throughout the streets. And you have an absent Minister of National Security refusing to address the critical areas of stemming the murders and the gang-related activity, because if that minister pontificates to the country to say, anti-crime measures is not my domain. Madam Speaker, I have always said that if you do not have compassion, you cannot be touched by the innocence of children and their plight, then what do you leave for the rest of Trinidad and Tobago? And that is why I raised today the issue of the Child Protection Unit. I have been raising the fact that the Child Protection Unit continues, like the Children's Authority, to be under-resourced and understaffed. And what did we get today from the member for Tobago East in her feeble and weak attempt to support and defend the member, the Minister of National Security? We got that we must work with the media because they are not doing enough. We must work with the religious leaders because they are not doing enough. But Madam Speaker, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, whether we like it or not, elected a government. They elected a government to ensure that the resources of the state to protect our most vulnerable are met. And therefore, when I've been asking about this Child Protection Unit in terms of the complement of officers, and Madam Speaker, I can give you anecdotal information here today, because on many occasions, some of those officers, they visit members of Parliament. I know for a fact that officers of the Child Protection Unit have visited my office and they complain that they are under-resourced, they are understaffed, and therefore, how do we expect those persons who are charged with the responsibility to protect our nation's children, our most vulnerable, how do we expect them to do their work if the member for Laventille West, the Minister of National Security, is unable or refuses, Madam Speaker, to see the innocence and the compassion, to have the compassion for our nation's children, especially those who, Madam Speaker, have found themselves in tremendous amount of difficulty in terms of needing that support from the Children's Authority and other agencies. Madam Speaker, in the motion brought by my colleague from Sawa Barataria, there's a word in the first recital. And that word struck me, Madam Speaker, because it says, whereas the Minister of National Security is responsible for ensuring public safety by the maintenance of law and order and the effective oversight of the national security infrastructure. Madam Speaker, colleagues opposite were at pains to say that they believe in the work of the member for Laventille West, the Minister of National Security. because I understand their trepidation had to do with the word effective oversight, because none of them on that side, far less for the rest of the country, can say that the member for Laventille West, the Minister of National Security, is an effective member, is an effective minister, and is giving effective oversight of the national security infrastructure. Madam Speaker, effectiveness means that the minister is doing the job satisfactorily. That the minister's effectiveness in the first recital would ensure that the welfare, innocence, and protection of our nation's children is paramount, Madam Speaker. And therefore, on the very first limb of this motion, the member for Barataria San Juan, Madam Speaker, is correct. He is accurate. He has hit the nail on the head in terms of seeing the pulse of our nation.
Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 53, I beg to move that the debate on the motion before us be adjourned.
Honourable members, the question is that a debate on the motion before us be adjourned. Those in favour say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Member for Couva South.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Be it resolved that the Industrial Relations Amendment to the second schedule order be annulled. Madam Speaker, only Monday of this week, the 19th of June, the country celebrated and commemorated the 86th anniversary of the labor riots of 1937. And what did we celebrate? What did we commemorate on Monday, the 19th of June? And what did the labor riots achieve? The labor riots achieved the legal formation of trade unions, the legal recognition of what we would call recognized majority union status in the work environment. And as a result of that, the right to strike, the right to engage in the collective bargaining process. And as a result of engaging in the collective bargaining process, today in 2023, the workers of Trinidad and Tobago enjoy unionized terms and conditions of employment. And when I say so, I mean group health plans, pension plans, allowances, and I could go on and on in terms of the importance. And it also saw the emergence of two very significant trade unions in the country, that it was the All Trinidad Sugar Estates and Factory Workers Trade Union, and also the Oilfield Workers Trade Union. And Madam Speaker, this motion to annul legal notice 163 has to be placed in a historical context, because, Madam Speaker, nowhere in the Labor Day message of the Prime Minister, the member for Digger Martin West, or the member for Labre, the Minister of Labour, did any of those two individuals who belong to the government of Trinidad and Tobago indicate to the workers of this country that the government indeed was seeking an amendment, or would be coming to the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago, having gazetted and so on, that there would be an amendment to the second schedule of the Industrial Relations Act. In fact, the Prime Minister stated, and I quote, "The significance of the day has to be recognized widely because every citizen owes a tremendous historical debt to the sweat of those brave, committed workers who in 1937 defied the colonial authorities and began the march for the rights of labor, which continues on the long road to where we are today." End of quote, Madam Speaker. And today, as I said, we have to understand our history and what is being attempted through this legal notice, number 163. And sometimes, it is of critical importance that I should read into the record also, Madam Speaker. Legal Notice 163, Republic of Trinidad and Tobago Industrial Relations Act, Chapter 8801, Order, made by the President under Section 67(6) of the Industrial Relations Act and subject to negative resolution of the Parliament. The Industrial Relations Amendment to the Second Schedule Order 2023. And it goes on to say, 1, this order may be cited as the Industrial Relations Amendment to the Second Schedule Order 2023. And 2, the Second Schedule to the Industrial Relations Act is amended by inserting after item 10 the following item. Number 11, the liquid fuel pipeline facilities and network services. And, Madam Speaker, the Industrial Relations Act had its precursor, its forerunner in the Industrial Stabilization Act of Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, between the period 1960 to 1964, Trinidad and Tobago suffered tremendously in terms of industrial relations, instability, strikes, and we could go on and on in terms of, it is documented that approximately 230 strikes occurred between that period, and 75,574 workers, an average of 15,000 per year, participated in these strikes and so on. And these strikes were instituted mainly over the issues like the recognition of trade unions and grievances, the negotiation or revision of collective agreements and sympathy strikes and so on. And, Madam Speaker, after the Industrial Stabilization Act and the industrial relations environment and so on, and the instability, then came the passage of the Industrial Relations Act in 1972, Madam Speaker. And the first amendment, the Industrial Relations Act in 1972, and it is important sometimes to reflect on the history and make those who understand and who are looking on, who are following this debate, to understand the importance of this piece of legislation. There may be those who may not know too that this particular act was passed in, I think, 48 hours, in one sitting of the lower house and one sitting of the upper house. And it has what we would call a colorful history. It's part of our industrial relations environment and the history of Trinidad and Tobago. And Madam Speaker, today we are attempting to nullify the government's attempt to amend the second schedule. And from a historical, and that is the, yes, but you see, Madam Speaker, that is that reflects the high-handed approach of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. The Minister of Finance declared that it is amended, but what was the real agenda? That is the importance, because the hypocrisy of the government is that they lauded the labor movement, they lauded the right to strike, they lauded the whole process of collective bargaining and so on. Monday gone. So it's hypocrisy, Madam Speaker, because what they did, and I will reveal that later on in my presentation, is to deny workers the right to engage in collective bargaining at this particular state entity. So you laud them Monday, and you, in a very ingenious and like a thief in the night,
Oh, no, you're right on what?
So remember, every member has a right to stand on a standing order. Okay? And, you know, I would really appreciate if we all speak of tolerance.
Madam Speaker, I respectfully rise on 48.1 and 48.4 and 6. This is not an order that concerns any one particular entity, Madam Speaker.
Okay, so, member for Couva South, in terms of, I think you could withdraw that and make the correction in terms of what you're saying and continue with your presentation.
Madam Speaker, I withdraw and I continue with my presentation. But what is important, as I said, is for us to understand the history, and what has been done through this order. And that is why the United National Congress, the opposition, filed this motion to annul the order. And apparently, the Minister of Finance will have none of this motion because of his disdain for the labor movement, his contempt for the labor movement.
48.6.
So, member for Couva South, in terms of, you know, I think you should ignore some of the crosstalk and make your contribution this way. I don't think the member for Diego Martin Northeast has yet joined the debate, so that, you know, the basis for that hasn't arisen. So just withdraw and continue.
Madam Speaker, I certainly withdraw. But in the context of the...
I guess you're going to say, you're going on to say, but my new point.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yes, and in making my delivery, the Minister of Finance will have no impact upon my delivery here this afternoon. And also, very quickly, because the Minister of Local Government rose on a point of order when he indicated that this was not about a particular entity, but I think if the minister read legal notice number 163, he will see it has to do with a state entity.
So let's move on. I ruled on that, you withdrew. Let's continue. Okay, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I said, the order and legal notice 163 amended the second schedule. of the Industrial Relations Act. And very quickly, to understand amendments from a historical point of view, the first amendment to the IRA was in 1978 through Act number 44 of 1978, and this amendment provided for two divisions of the court, namely the creation of the Essential Services Division and also the General Services Division. And in 1979, the IRA was further amended through Act number 2 of 1979 to provide for the establishment of, through the Office of the President, to indicate to which division of the court judges were appointed to. And in 1987, Act number 3 of 1987 enabled the Minister of Labor to refer an unresolved dispute to the Industrial Court after a period of 3 months or more of continuing industrial action. Madam Speaker, and when I look and examine the contents of the Industrial Relations Act, in 1972, the 31st of July, the broad parameters indicated too that it was an act to repeal and replace the Industrial Stabilization Act 1965 and to make better provision for the stabilization, improvement, and promotion of industrial relations, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I want to simply ask the government, through this order or this legal notice number 163, whether this order will really promote and improve the state of industrial relations in Trinidad and Tobago. What will it achieve? And will it benefit the ordinary citizen of the country, those workers at the liquid pipeline facility and so on? And will it lead to an improvement in his or her standard of living and the decent agenda that a worker seeks to achieve? And Madam Speaker, these questions are very important in the context of what this government has been espousing as it relates to the rights of workers, the right to join a trade union, the right to pursue collective bargaining, and so on. No one can deny that the government signed prior, when they were in opposition, prior to becoming the government of Trinidad and Tobago in September of 2015, signed a memorandum of understanding with the labor movement, and in their manifesto, Madam Speaker, they indicated that the Constitution of the People's National Movement recognizes not only the rights of trade unions, but also those of workers. I want to reiterate that the Constitution of the People's National Movement recognizes not only the rights of trade unions.
48-1, Madam Speaker.
So, Member for Couva South, I must say that I am giving you very wide berth, but I myself am struggling. So I'll ask you very quickly to tie up what you are giving us with the subject matter of this order that we seek to annul.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would simply and probably members of the government, they understood, or they fully understand what they have done with through the legal notice 163, and their greatest trouble is that it will be exposed as a result of what is being put forward in this motion. That is what is troubling them. And that is why you will see that during the course of my presentation, they will be jumping up and down in order or in the attempt for them not to be exposed. Because, Madam Speaker, it is important for us to understand. And you see, in the Industrial Relations Act, there are a number of what we would call, if you go to Section 2 of the Act, under the broad heading preliminary, you would see a number of definitions. A bargaining agent means a trade union certified as such by the board with respect to a bargaining unit for the purpose of collective bargaining. It also goes on to say what is the bargaining unit, what is the collective bargaining process, what the court means, and also it says or reflects in relation to what is termed to be an essential industry and essential services, which means the services set out in the second schedule of the Industrial Relations Act, Madam Speaker. And immediately, I want to go in the direction or go to what is stated in the second schedule of the Industrial Relations Act. And that will be found on page 79 of the Act, and it states second schedule, essential services. 1, electricity service. In brackets, generation, transmission, and distribution. 2, water and storage services. 3, internal telephone service. 4, external communications, in brackets, telephone, telegraph, wireless, end of brackets. 5, fire service. 6, health services. 7, hospital services. 8, sanitation services, open brackets, including scavenging. 9, public school bus service. 10, civil aviation services, including all services provided by a commercial airline, the majority of the aircraft of which are registered in Trinidad and Tobago, are owned by the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago or by a company incorporated in Trinidad and Tobago, aircraft maintenance, refueling, and RAM services, air traffic control and meteorological services, and airline catering. And this schedule is amended by inserting after number 10 the following item. Number 11, the liquid fuel pipeline facilities and network services limited. That, again, Madam Speaker,
I rise on standing order 48, 1, 4, and 6. That is not what the order says.
So, member, I think in the debate, who's ever going to rebut will deal with that. Member.
Madam Speaker, again, just for the records, I read from the order that was presented to me in the context of a note from the Secretary to the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago. And again, I will quote from it because apparently the member for San Fernando West, the Minister of Local Government, is a member of the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago. And apparently he has not read or did not get this particular document in his notes. And again, I will read for the benefit of all members of the government that legal notice number 163, and that is what is being debated here this afternoon, legal notice 163, the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago Industrial Relations Act 8801, made by the President under Section 67(6) of the Industrial Relations Act and subject to the negative resolution of Parliament, the Industrial Relations Amendment to the Second Schedule Order 2023. This order may be cited as the Industrial Relations Amendment to the Second Scheduled Order 2023. 2. The second schedule to the Industrial Relations Act is amended by inserting after item 10 the following item, number 11, the liquid pipeline facilities and network services. It is dated the 26th of May 2023, Madam Speaker. That is this, right?
I
Madam
therefore
Speaker,
rise on the standing order as to relevance, because that is not what the member put on the Hansard a little while ago.
And overrule on the point of 48.1. I think it can be treated with otherwise. Continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Unless I read from two documents, I stand by what is before me, and the document dated the 26th of May 2023, 1C Hemley, Secretary to the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, as I said, you have a number of definitions in relation to what is found in the Industrial Relations Act. And this amendment to the schedule, or in terms of the insertion after 10 in relation to adding an additional one to become the number 11, one has to ask how or what was the yardstick that was used? What was the yardstick that was used to insert the liquid fuel pipeline facilities? And just for the benefit of the Minister of Local Government and Network Services. So what was the yardstick? How did the government arrive or come to this conclusion that the liquid fuel pipeline facilities and network services needed to be added to the second schedule of the Industrial Relations Act? That is the fundamental question which must be answered by the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Because, Madam Speaker, they don't like to hear these things, because they will be jumping up and down. This is a government that, when they were in opposition, as I said, they signed a memorandum of understanding with the labor movement. If you peruse their manifesto, they promised milk and honey. They promised milk and honey to the labor movement. They promised to amend everything under the sun as it relates to labor legislation in Trinidad and Tobago. And in 8 years, what they have done, they brought an amendment to the second schedule via a ministerial order. Via a ministerial order, like a thief in the night. Madam Speaker, that is the reality, and that is what they don't want Trinidad and Tobago to hear and to be exposed to.
1B. It's about the fifth time we hear that.
So, thank you for the invitation, member for San Fernando West, but I haven't reached there as yet. Please continue, Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And what is important, as I said, is that there are a number of issues, and I'm sure the Minister of Labour, who may join this debate, or I see the member of San Fernando for San Fernando West is taking copious notes. But you see, Madam Speaker, there are a number of issues that are important to workers over the last 8 years. 150,000 approximately have lost their jobs. Companies have gone belly up in this country. And not one amendment in the last 8 years that will improve the terms and conditions of workers in the country. And in that regard, one has to ask, or one must ask the question to probably the Minister of Labour, because under the Industrial Relations Act, there is the Industrial Relations Advisory Committee. I think it's Section 80 of the Act. It has been established, the Industrial Relations Advisory Committee, and whether the amendment to the second schedule was even placed before the Industrial Relations Advisory Committee. Because the Industrial Relations Advisory Committee is tripartite in nature. It has a chairperson, government representative, labor representatives, and so on. And they continue to boast of dialogue, they continue to boast of consultation, and so on. And whether this really found favor, it found favor with the stakeholders in the context of the Industrial Relations Advisory Committee in Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker. Because as I said, we have been promised a suite of legislation, and whether to this particular order, I know it was done by ministerial order, and and it is important to ask, Madam Speaker, whether there was any discussions with the Joint Trade Union Movement, NATUC, the National Trade Union Center, FITAN, and so on, as it relates to the decision. Because, Madam Speaker, you have to understand, if you look at the chronology of events in relation to legal notice 163, I will now indicate what is the true intention, or what has been the real motive or the real agenda behind the emergence of this legal notice. And for us in the United National Congress, we are of the firm conviction that it is to prevent the workers at the liquid fuel pipeline facilities and network services, prevent them from joining a trade union of their choice and engaging in collective bargaining, Madam Speaker. Because the answer is simple, and the records will reflect that on the 28th, based on information that arrived in my mailbox, Madam Speaker, and I challenge any one of them to dispute and to contradict what I am saying on behalf of the opposition, is that on the 20th of April 2023, the Oilfield Workers Trade Union made an application for recognition, recognized majority union status on behalf of the workers at this facility. That on the 24th of April 2023, the union wrote to the company or the employer informing them of the application in accordance with the Industrial Relations Act. And the Minister of Labour must get up in this debate and deny whether this application was copied to him in his capacity as the Minister of Labour. And on the 28th of April 2023, the notice of the application was issued by the Registration, Recognition and Certification Board, which is also found in the Industrial Relations Act, Madam Speaker. And on the 28th of April 2023, notice of the application for recognized majority union status by the Oilfield Workers Trade Union was issued by the Registration, Recognition and Certification Board. And further, on the 28th of April 2023, the Registration, Recognition and Certification Board wrote the Oilfield Workers Trade Union acknowledging receipt of its application for recognized majority union status. And then on the 24th of May 2023, the Registration, Recognition and Certification Board, through correspondence, indicated to the employer, I want Trinidad and Tobago to listen carefully, indicated to the employer that it had not responded to the application contrary to Section 19 of the Industrial Relations Act. This is the series of events. And then, on the 26th of May 2023, like a thief in the night, legal notice 163 was drawn up in the context of this order and to specifically amend the Industrial Relations Act. That is the issue, Madam Speaker. And the United National Congress will have none of this in terms of this government's continued attack on the labor movement and the right of ordinary citizens to join a trade union of his or her choice. This is why I indicate that it is the most hypocritical and diabolical act on the part of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. On Monday, the 19th, you're lauding workers, you're lauding the trade union movement, you're saying, how great thou art as it relates to the right to engage in collective bargaining, recognize majority union status, unionized terms and conditions of employment, and then not telling them on the 26th of May, you, through the cabinet and this, at the whims and fancies of the Prime Minister and every one of them in the cabinet, they lick up the right of over 100 workers to join a trade union of their choice. Arima, history will all judge us in terms of our commitment to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And this is why we are saying on this side, the UNC had its foundation in a struggle for peace, bread, and justice. We were committed to upholding the dignity and the rights of the ordinary worker in the society. And Madam Speaker, at the end of the day, we will not be part of any plot to continue to decimate the existence of the trade union movement in Trinidad and Tobago. They have done it at Caroni 1975 Limited, they did it at Petrotrin, they did it at TSTT. And they intend to do it at Wassan, Tech, and Lake Asphalt. And I could go on and on tonight, Madam Speaker. And that is why we will say to the workers of Trinidad and Tobago that what they signed in the Memorandum of Understanding and their manifesto of 2015, they must take all the copies of this Memorandum of Understanding and the manifesto that they could find, and create one big bonfire on the 14th of August, 2023. And just as they would have retrenched, through their policies, retrenched and destabilized over 150,000 families, I am saying to the country that come the 14th of August, the people of Trinidad and Tobago must retrench the government in the upcoming local government elections. And Madam Speaker, with these few words, I beg to move.
Member for Point of Vale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to second the motion and I reserve my right to speak.
Honourable members, the motion being seconded, I shall now propose the question for debate. Be it resolved that the Industrial Relations Amendment to the Second Schedule Order 2023 be annulled. Minister of Labour.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this debate. My learned friend from Couva South indicated earlier today that he's quite competent, and he went on to indicate how much experience he had in the Parliament in making laws and so on. And I have no doubt, but I'm somewhat disappointed that he had to take all that time to ask one simple question, which is, give us the reasons for the inclusion. We could have saved a lot of time. Contrary to popular belief, the PNM has been consistent in its approach to unions and good governance. And we will continue in that particular vein. There was an advertisement Burger King had in the 80s, where in making a burger, there was an old woman who used to say, "Where's the meat?" And therefore I have to ask today, where is the meat? I'm seeing bread, no meat. So I would not like to try and compete with my Couva South comrade with regards to the history and so on. That I would lose that battle. But what battle I will win is the battle of facts. The Industrial Relations Amendment to the Second Schedule Order 2023 amended the second schedule to the Industrial Relations Act by inserting after Chapter Item 10 the following Item 11, liquid fuel pipeline facilities and network services. Madam Speaker, Section 67(9) of the Industrial Relations Act states that the President of Trinidad and Tobago may, by order subject to negative resolution of both Houses of Parliament, vary the second schedule by adding thereto or removing therefrom any service. The motion raised by the member of Couva seeks to annul this order. There are a couple questions that we must first define and answer, and the first one is, what is an essential service? I noted that during the entire conversation with the House, that was never mentioned and or tried to be defined. So, member for Vancouver South, you could take out your pen and take some notes. The concept of an essential service has been enshrined in our laws for a very long time. An essential service is one which is so vital to the day-to-day existence of any population that it is necessary to preserving life, health, public safety, and basic societal functioning, as well as to ensuring an uninterrupted flow of such services, for example, water, electricity, hospital, aviation, transportation, and health services. Whether they are delivered by public or private providers are not the issue. Services may be considered to be essential because they are public goods that sustain the well-being of each citizen and help the development of society as a whole. Most international labor organization member states have adopted a variety of measures to ensure the continuous delivery of basic services by declaring them essential services and or by requiring minimum service levels that the population must receive without interruption. I ask the question, is the liquid fuel pipeline facilities and network services an essential service? As set out by the ILO supervisory bodies, these measures should be balanced by the needs of the fundamental rights of the citizens of the country. Why have these been included? Honorable members will observe in a previous amendment a new category of essential services. Public school bus service was added. No, let me say that. In a previous amendment, a new category was actually added, and that was the public school bus services. Historically, some of you might recall that this particular service came out of some issues in April 1969 that impacted the citizenry of this country in such a way that the government had to intervene. The liquid fuel pipeline facilities network services are clearly critical infrastructure and essential services. These facilities and services are a critical part of the energy infrastructure of this country, responsible for the storage and transportation of motor fuels, gasoline, and aviation fuel. So we need to understand clearly what we are talking about. And what we are talking about here is motor fuels, gasoline, and aviation fuels. In fact, that particular facility that we are talking about has a capacity to distribute 75% of the country's liquid petroleum fuels. A disruption in these services can therefore result in a disruption to the supply of gasoline and aviation fuel to this country. What would be the impact of such curtailment in the delivery of fuels and aviation, gasoline and aviation fuels? You see, Madam Speaker, we could talk about a lot of things. We could make it very dramatic. But the truth is that if the supply of motor gasoline and aviation is stopped, what happens? Fire services can't run, taxis can't run, buses can't run, ambulances can't run. We have an issue with aviation fuel. Planes can't take off the ground. Trinidad and Tobago will have issues with regards our reputation, our reputational risk in terms of how we are viewed as a country and how we impact a number of international issues. So when we say we are trying or give the impression to say that the government of the day is trying to move somehow in a surreptitious manner to deny workers their rights, and we don't understand what the fundamental issue of creating an essential service or a new category is, then we would have essentially lost the playbook at that point in time. There was a process for inclusion of this particular service, which started in August 6, 2018. This just didn't happen in January of 2023 or in May of 2023. This started in 2018 when the Ministry of Labour was asked by the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries to comment on the inclusion of the following provisions as an inclusion to the second schedule as an essential service: liquid fuel pipeline facilities and network services. At the Law Revision Committee meeting to discuss the inclusion in the second schedule, which was held on May 15, 2023, the Ministry of Labour indicated that it did not have any objections to the inclusion of these services because we understood the impact. Where essential services are concerned, strikes, lockouts, and any form of industrial action cannot take place in accordance with the Industrial Relations Act. That does not mean that the workers cannot be represented by a union. All it says is that you do not have the right to strike, lockouts, or any form of industrial action that will impact the country in such a negative way that it would be very disruptive to our daily lives. However, there is provision in the Industrial Relations Act to deal with disputes which emanate from essential services, and that particular way of handling it is through conciliation with the Minister of Labour, and if there is no agreement, then the minister could send it on to the industrial court for settlement. It is also noted, and the question was asked very specifically, that within the ministry, the comments of the chair of the Industrial Relations Advisory Committee, which is established under Section 81 of the IRA, was sought on this inclusion, and no objection was given to the Ministries of Labour's position. The sole ramification of these services being deemed essential are that these class of workers are barred from undertaking industrial action further to Section 67 of the Industrial Relations Act. As I said before, except in essential services, the Act permits strikes in every other area of economic activity. In some of these areas, however, strike, especially one of a long duration, could have serious and devastating effect on the entire economy, and irreparable damage may be done. For example, just consider for one moment a prolonged strike in the oil and gas industry. For such a long time that gas delivery is curtailed and the electricity commission are cut off, and there is no electrical power, and as a result, hospital services will be disrupted, the lives of every citizen will be affected. It is to avoid the development of such a situation that Clause 65 was inserted, which is being sought. What is being sought is nothing new. It is an accepted industrial relation practice in many democratic countries and jurisdictions. The provisions of this clause enable the minister, when industrial action is threatened or taken, whether or not in conformity with the Act, to apply to the court for an injunction, restraining the parties from commencing continuation of such action. This does not mean that the court will automatically grant the injunction just because the minister asks for it. In fact, I am confident that a large majority of the people of our country would agree that the burden of duty of any government is to protect the vital interests which members of the public is being spared. What's that? Okay. Yeah. As I was saying, Madam Speaker, I am confident that a very large majority of the people of our country would agree that the burden of duty of any government is to protect the vital interests which members of the public have in being spared the hardships caused by work stoppages, which could cause severe damage to not only the economy, but to the daily lives of citizens. It has always been a tenet of good industrial relations practice that industrial conflict in areas which stifle the flow of essential goods and services should be avoided. While I maintain a firm stand against industrial action in essential services, I pledge and I assure my colleagues on the other side, should they ever return into power sometime in the distant future, will also pledge with equal vigor to pursue the settlement of disputes which may arise in such situations. Where there is failure to settle such issues, disputes at work, at the workplace, or in conciliation, they will be immediately sent to the court, where I'm sure they will be expeditiously handled. It is therefore not reasonable to annul the amendment. As Minister of Labour, I reiterate the commitment of the Government of Trinidad and Tobago to good, fair, and collaborative industrial relations practice. This addition simply recognizes that liquid fuel pipeline facility and network services are essential to the day-to-day running of this country. I do not understand how such a simple concept cannot be understood in terms of impact. So this is not about union busting. This is not about creating hardships for a handful of workers. This is about a national good. This is about protecting the country from shutdown. This is about making good use of our natural resources and ensuring that every citizen has the ability to enjoy the same. So, Madam Speaker, unlike my colleague from Couva South, I think I would have taken fewer words to say some of the same things he may have wanted to say, but just because he's on the other side, he wouldn't say it. So, Madam Speaker, I rest my case. I don't think I have to overtalk this. I don't think I have to try to build a legend or put appendices to it. It's quite simple. These services are essential, and because they are essential, we cannot allow the disruption of those services. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Chicanos West? Oh, Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And the Minister of Labour and the member for Labre stated in his presentation that this is going to be about the battle of facts. And really and truly, the minister was pedestrian in his response in attempting to justify what the Cabinet has done in relation to this amendment to the second schedule of the Industrial Relations Act, Madam Speaker. It was done in a very, we will reiterate that it was done in a very clandestine manner. It was done surreptitiously. It was done to deny, because I could remember in this very said, if it was not here, in the other place, on the waterfront, the Minister of Finance indicated that those who labor must hold the reins of power. And in the award, of patriotic energies being identified as the preferred bidder, in his glee, he nearly fell over the table when he made that presentation about let those labor hold the reins of power, because we on this side believe in the principles of ensuring that workers' rights in the workplace must be protected, and that could be only realized through the recognized majority union process, the Registration, Recognition, and Certification Board. And I want to urge the Minister of Labour to ensure, because it has been reported to you that the Registration, Recognition, and Certification Board, through correspondence, indicated that the employer had not responded to the application contrary, that is the application for recognized majority union status by the Oilfield Workers Trade Union on behalf of the employees at this particular entity and facility. If you are true to your word and you do not feel threatened by the Oilfield Workers Trade Union in pursuing and defending the interests of over 100 workers in the work environment at this facility, then, Madam Speaker, through you, we will all uphold the good principles of meeting and treating in good faith and in promoting the stability and of workers throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, it is my pleasure to say to you, I beg to move.
Honourable members, the question is, be it resolved that the Industrial Relations Amendment to the Second Schedule Order 2023 be annulled. All in favour say aye. All against? No. I think the noes have it. A division.
Mr. Dialsing?
No.
Mr. Imbert?
No.
Mr. Young?
No. I will tell Roger.
Mr. Awari?
No.
Ms. Beckles?
No.
Mrs. Webster Roy?
No.
Ms. Cujo?
No.
Dr. Gadsby Dolly?
No.
Mr. Gonzalez?
No.
Mr. McClatchy?
No.
Mr. Cummings?
No.
Mr. De Nobrega?
No.
Mr. Manning?
No.
Mrs. Morris Julian?
No.
Mr. Scotland?
No.
Mr. Richards?
No.
Mr. Monroe?
No.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Ms. Amin?
Yes.
Mr. Indar Singh?
Yes.
Mr. Padarat?
Yes.
Okay, so members, let's have a little order so that the clerk can get this done correctly.
Mr. Hussain?
Yes.
Mr. Rambali?
Yes.
Mr. Ram?
Yes.
Dr. Ragbeers?
Yes.
Ms. Haynes?
Yes.
Mr. Ratiram?
Yes.
Mr. Sitran?
Yes.
Dr. Sitran, sir. The result of the division is as follows. 11 members voted for, 17 members voted against, and there was no abstentions.
Honourable members, on a division with 11 members voting in favour, with 17 members voting against, and with no abstention, the motion on the order that the order be annulled has failed. Leader of the House.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that this House do now adjourn to Wednesday, 28th June at 1:30 p.m. Madam Speaker, at that time, we will continue debate which was started by the Honourable Attorney General, a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Administration of Justice, Indictable Proceedings Act 2011. We hope to complete that and to also debate the arbitration bill. Thank you very much.
Honourable members, I have been informed that there's agreement that that there were two matters on the adjournment and these matters are to be deferred. If that is so. Yes. Okay. So, honourable members, the question is that this House do now adjourn to Wednesday, the 20th day of June, 2023 at 1:30 p.m. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? I think the ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned to Wednesday, the 20th day of June, 2023 at 1:30 p.m.